Your Excellency, Governor Roper, Honourable Premier, Honourable Deputy Premier, Honourable Deputy Speaker, other Honourable Members and Members of Cabinet, Honourable Deputy Leader of the Opposition, all elected Members of Parliament and former Members of Parliament. A very special welcome to our youth parliamentarians, their parents, siblings, teachers, I see some classmates up there, and all other invited guests. As the chair of the Youth Parliament, I extend to all a heartfelt welcome to the House of Parliament. It is a privilege to serve in this capacity and observe our young parliamentarians get engaged with national, regional, and international issues. The theme of this 16th Youth Parliament for Commonwealth Day is Forging a Sustainable and Peaceful Common Future. Before I give my brief remarks, it was kindly asked that the presiding officer or speaker read the King's message from the chair at the opening of proceedings. Therefore, I will read accordingly. His Majesty the King's Commonwealth Day Message, 13th March 2023. Commonwealth Day was an occasion of particular pride for my beloved mother, the late Queen, a treasured opportunity to celebrate our Commonwealth family, to whose service she dedicated her long and remarkable life. In succeeding Her Majesty as head of the Commonwealth, I draw great strength from her example, together with all that I have learned from the extraordinary people I have met throughout the Commonwealth over so many years. The Commonwealth has been a constant in my own life, and yet its diversity continues to amaze and inspire me. Its near boundless potential as a force for good in the world demands our highest ambition. Its sheer scale challenges us to unite and be bold. This week marks the 10th anniversary of the Charter of the Commonwealth, which gives expression to our defining values: peace and justice, tolerance, respect and solidarity, care for our environment, and for the most vulnerable among us. These are not simply ideals. In each lies an imperative to act and to make a practical difference in the lives of the 2.6 billion people who call the Commonwealth home. Whether on climate change and biodiversity loss, youth opportunity and education, global health or economic cooperation, the Commonwealth can play an indispensable role in the most pressing issues of our time. Ours is an association not just of shared values, but of common purpose and joint action. In this, we are blessed with the ingenuity and imagination of a third of the world's population, including 1.5 billion people under the age of 30. Our shared humanity contains such precious diversity of thought, culture, tradition, and experience. By listening to each other, we will find so many of the solutions that we seek. This extraordinary potential, which we hold in common, is more than equal to the challenges we face. It offers us unparalleled strength, not merely to face the future, but to build it. Here, the Commonwealth has an incredible opportunity and responsibility to create a genuinely durable future, one that offers the kind of prosperity that is in harmony with nature, and that will also secure our unique and only planet for generations to come. The myriad connections between our nations have sustained and enriched us for more than 7 decades. Our commitment to peace, progress, and opportunity will sustain us for many more. Let ours be a Commonwealth that not only stands together, but strives together in restless and practical pursuit of the global common good. That marks the end of the King's message. The Commonwealth Parliamentary Association will be celebrating Commonwealth Day across the CPA's 9 regions, 180 parliaments and legislators. The year 2023, as we just heard, has been designated as the year of our youth, to connect and work together at many levels through deep-rooted networks of friendship and goodwill. The CPA also has a duty and obligation to reach out to the youth. To that end, the Youth Parliament program serves to elevate and enlighten the younger generation in their pursuit of knowledge and information derived from their various areas of research and understanding of the issues. I am confident and proud to say that as youth parliamentarians, you all have demonstrated the discipline and commitment to prepare for these proceedings today, and you've gracefully acknowledged and accepted the guidance and tutelage offered to you in preparation for this sitting, amongst other things. An integral part of the CPA is also to work towards a better representation of women in legislators and for the furtherance of gender equity across the Commonwealth. As I look at the members of our Youth Parliament sitting today, I see the Cayman Islands meeting that goal. Today, you will be debating 2 motions, namely, the amended private members motion number 1 of 2023, implementation of a progressive income tax system in the Cayman Islands, and 2, private members motion number 2 of 2023, implementing a new public transport system in the Cayman Islands. It is important that I mention that considering the lack of legislative framework on these subject matters that will be debated, the contribution from today's debate will not be ignored or disregarded. It's extremely pleasing and promising to see you, as the youth parliamentarians, debate these controversial issues. It's good to see you are taking lead. Previous contributions made by past youth parliamentarians in the Cayman Islands have influenced government to introduce a number of bills, some of them, or all of them now, if they were laws, they're now referred to as acts, as you all would have learned. To name a few, some of them relate to the environment with single-use plastic, also the sexual harassment bill, amongst others. So clearly the issues that you're going to debate today will be considered by our policymakers and legislators to help them craft the legislative framework in due course, if required. The theme illustrates the Commonwealth Youth Parliament, which focuses on the future of young Caymanian parliamentarians to assist and generate ideas for consideration for policy implementation. Undoubtedly, the Parliament fosters and ensures the exercise of good governance. And it is an environment that is conducive for networking, which will inevitably enhance leadership and effective communication skills tailored to develop the future of our younger generations. And it's also, as you all probably can attest, is character building for our youth. Today's Youth Parliament comprises of 16 youth parliamentarians ranging from the ages of 14 to 20 as our parliamentarians for the day, and possibly many of you sitting here today will be the future government and legislators. Your impact and contributions will be felt not only locally but regionally. This experience will be a pedestal for greater things in your life, and by extension, a benefit to the entire country. So rest assured that your contributions will be relied on. And for that reason, I encourage you all to continue to express your concerns, not just today, but by familiarizing yourselves with the draft legislation that the government distributes for public consultation. The skills that you have developed from Youth Parliament will equip you now to make future and meaningful contributions. I would also like to challenge all of you to get acquainted with the Cayman Islands Law Reform Commission website, where your input will influence changes to reform or enact the legislations in our country. With that, I sincerely wish all of you the best in your deliveries and contributions to this Youth Parliament as you debate these two motions. Thank you.
Should know that one. The Honourable Madam Speaker, having already established, very well established, the protocols for the morning, it leaves for me to say good morning and welcome to you, the Youth Parliamentarians, the reason we're all here together this morning. I am certainly honoured to address you today on behalf of the opposition and that of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Roy McTaggart, who is off island and was unable to be here this morning. Your hard work has paid off, and shortly you will begin to debate two very interesting motions. I'm sure you must be a bit excited, perhaps even a bit nervous, but I have no doubt you will all do well. And I know that your families, and I'm so happy to see so many parents here today, are very proud of you. And so, a sincere congratulations to you from myself and all of my colleagues in the opposition on participating and, I'm sure, successfully preparing for today. Forging a sustainable and peaceful common future is a theme of Commonwealth Day 2023. That is a lofty goal. A goal that includes a focus on building a better future for our citizens under the age of 30. According to the Cayman Islands 2021 census report, we have about 23,000 people living on these islands below the age of 30. That age group obviously includes all of you, your friends, your siblings. This goal is about all of your future. That realization should help to make this a more purposeful and meaningful morning. As a part of today's commemorations, young people here and across the Commonwealth raised a flag for peace. I hope that this act by our youth comes to mean more than a commemoration of the day, but also an appreciation that as young people, as our future leaders, you have the capacity to make a difference. The ability to help make your world and your lives better by the choices that each of you make. This is more than words for me, as I genuinely believe, and as I should say, I genuinely believe, and therefore so should you. You may be too young to understand what Hurricane Ivan was like. Many of you may not have been born in 2004. But you have heard the stories. However, each of you has come to learn what a global pandemic can do, how a microscopic organism that we can't see turned our world upside down over the past 2 years. Young people, you had your world and your lives disrupted. Nonetheless, your presence here today indicates the resiliency of your youth, of our youth, and our community. You refused to be defined by that virus. Instead, you were determined to be defined by your strengths, your spirit, your character, and the ability to rise above challenges. You chose resiliency over giving up. Our common future depends on all of us being resilient. We all know, but you, our younger people, certainly understand the need to be better stewards of our planet. We live on low-lying islands, so climate change and its various impacts can be especially disastrous to all of us. So we must do our best to reduce the risk of a warming planet, even if we are to have hope for any sort of positive common future. Your motion calling for a modern public transportation system shows that you understand this concern. Fewer cars on our road will mean less carbon dioxide polluting the atmosphere and helping to warm this planet. We cannot have a sustainable common future if we do not treat our earth better. Fewer cars on our roads will also lessen traffic congestion. By cutting back the long hours many of us now spend driving between home, school, and work, must have a positive effect on our lives. If you live in the eastern districts, you understand the traffic frustrations firsthand. So, a properly conceived, reliable public transport system that reduces traffic and provides options for owning your own car will improve the quality of life for all of our citizens. Not only can we avoid the high cost of vehicle ownership, but dramatically reducing the traffic congestion we now experience will ease the frustrations of commuting, especially, as I said, for those of you in the eastern districts. We cannot have a sustainable common future without paying attention to the quality of life concerns that we face today. In raising the flag of peace today, I hope you took a moment to think about the many places across our globe where conflicts are occurring. Conflicts where great suffering is inflicted to innocent people, including the young and the old. I hope you also took a moment to appreciate the peace that we have here at our home. We must all do our best to ensure that the future of the Cayman Islands remains as peaceful as it is today, and perhaps maybe even more. Youth parliamentarians, I know you understand that we cannot have a common future without appreciating that every human life has value. This means ensuring peace and security here at home, but also working to ensure every Caymanian, especially every young Caymanian, has the best opportunity to have a successful life on our islands. The other motion being debated today seeks the implementation of a system of progressive income tax. Whether or not an income tax system is a solution to a better and fairer Cayman Islands, that will be contemplated during your debate. Again, I look forward to listening to the arguments put forward on both sides. However, the core of this motion, at its very heart, is a common goal that all of our people have an opportunity to succeed in society, live productive lives, and raise their families. It's about opportunity and fairness. We cannot have a common future without a society that ensures that we all have a fair and equal opportunity to improve our lives. So yes, both motions debated today are meaningful conversations for our islands and our people. And the fact that these issues are being debated in our youth parliament by our youth parliamentarians make for a good lesson for you and all of us watching and listening. I will paraphrase the words of the leader of the opposition when he spoke at last year's youth parliament. It is essential for you to understand that a sustainable and peaceful common future is influenced by many things, but one thing is undoubtedly influenced by, and that is politics. Your participation today and the topics being debated indicate that you understand the importance of Parliament, democracy, and debate in making our country and our world a better place. And your participation today will hopefully encourage you to be involved in our communities and to take up the mantle of leadership, starting today. I will close by quoting a few lines from a poem by Tupac Shakur, where he wrote about change and keeping dreams alive. In his poem entitled "And Tomorrow," Tupac wrote, "Today is filled with anger, fueled with hidden hate, scared of being outcast, afraid of common fate. Today is built on tragedies which no one wants to face, nightmares to humanities and morally disgraced. But tomorrow, I see change, a change to build anew, build on spirit, intent on heart, and ideals based on truth. And tomorrow, I wake with a second wind and strong because of pride, to know I fought with all my heart to keep my dreams alive." Youth parliamentarians, should you ever feel disheartened, remember those words. Gather your second wind, rise strong and work hard at keeping your dreams alive and making your world, our world, a better place. I wish you all the absolute best as you debate these two fascinating motions. And I thank you for the considerable time you have invested in this important project. I'd like to also recognize and thank the clerk and all of her colleagues who have worked on arranging this program and helping, along with all of our political colleagues, to prepare you for today. And of course, I thank the parents and guardians and teachers who have encouraged you and have helped you prepare for today. So, leaves for me to say, have a wonderful day, youth parliamentarians, but also enjoy yourself. And I look forward to listening to your debates and conversing with you at the end. Enjoy and best of luck. And may the Lord bless these three Cayman Islands. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, wearing your hat as President this morning, I want to join in thanking you very much for establishing protocol and welcoming all who are here. I want to wish you all a very, very warm good morning. Particularly like to extend welcome to all of our youth parliamentarians, their families, friends, and supporters, those within government, and those members of parliament who have been working assiduously to help you all prepare to be here today and to make this day happen. I am sure that you will do yourselves proud, and you will do your families proud, you will do your country very proud. As Premier, I am proud to be welcoming you all here to this, the 16th Youth Parliament in Cayman, and I can honestly say that standing here in this House of Parliament in front of our next generation of leaders is always an exciting experience. The occasion is also an opportunity to discuss and reflect on the designated theme for 2023, fittingly named Commonwealth Year of Youth. It's difficult to accept that an entire year has passed since we hosted Youth Parliament last. But I know that many of you have been working very diligently over months, sacrificing your time in preparation for today's auspicious event. Trust me, your dedication and commitment does not go unnoticed. It is very much appreciated. Now, every year we hold this Youth Parliament on Commonwealth Day on the second Monday of March, in celebration of unity, diversity, and most importantly, our aspiring young leaders who are present here today with us. Many of you may be at your stage in life where you're facing what some psychologists call generativity versus stagnation. There is a developmental psychologist by the name of Dr. Erik Erikson who identifies this as the 7th stage of 8 stages of psychosocial development. The battle between generativity and stagnation at your age comes from a desire to do well and have a meaningful and leave a meaningful mark in the world. That means you are generative. You want to leave this world in a better place than the state in which you found it. We in government and all members of this Parliament share that view. However, many young people do struggle to see how they can make a true difference. They sometimes feel stuck, and they feel they do not know their purpose yet. My message to you, young people, today is, do not worry if you feel that you don't yet know your purpose. When I was at your age, I was certain that I had no interest in being a lawyer. I ended up doing that for 30 years. I was even more certain that I would never become a politician. Look how that worked out. So it fills me with hope to see so many of our young people here today being generative, being in touch with the issues that are important to our society, such as climate change, the cost of living, and affordable housing, to identify just a few. There are many false assumptions that are made at times that young people do not have or recognize their role in society and that they're not necessarily contributing to improving society. But you are here today to demonstrate that that is a false view, a false assumption. You are clearly here today, and I'm sure by the quality of the debate and the contribution and the arguments you'll be making today on these really important issues, you will demonstrate that you have a very keen understanding of how these issues impact the quality of your lives, the lives of everyone here today, and also the future generations and the impact thereon. I think I can confidently say, standing here today, that to underestimate our youth is a grave mistake. They must have a voice today because they have, and you all have, far more invested in the future than we are trying to create. You have more invested, you have more future invested than we do. Many should view a lack of youth participation as a core problem of institutional politics. I want to say that this government has adopted a core policy of practicing diversity as far as possible, which includes trying to ensure at all times that the views of young people are represented at every opportunity, which brings us to why we're here today. The first of the two motions, implementation of a progressive tax system in the Cayman Islands, with the intent of resolving wealth disparity, socioeconomic inequality, and disproportionate effects to lower-income households, is a very laudable attempt at addressing these issues. I respect this well-thought-out motion, centered on principles of economic distribution, and I thank the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Ms. Abby Walton, elected member for West Bay West, for moving the motion. I'm very keen to hear the proposals on how a progressive income tax may be implemented and maintained in our islands, as opposed to our system of indirect, consumption-based tax, which we have in place. I hasten to add that this interest is from an intellectual perspective. It is certainly not unbeknownst to the government and members of our wider society that the cost of living is considerably high. It remains an issue. And I'm impressed that this motion is being brought as a means to improve access to education, housing, and healthcare. These are goals that are certainly outlined in our existing strategic broad outcomes and objectives to promote economic recovery across our islands and the continued safety of our people. The youth government is bringing the second motion, implementing a new public transport system in the Cayman Islands. Clearly a very topical issue for the government as we work to address the traffic problem and promote more sustainable modes of transport. So we're absolutely looking forward to your contributions on how we can go about developing a fully functioning, reliable transport system. That is something that is very high on our agenda, so clearly your contributions will be significant and important to take into account. Remember, I said your views are critically important to this country as well, as young people, because you have more invested in the future than we do. I would like to thank Ms. Elizabeth Thomas, elected member for Georgetown Central, for moving this motion. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the existing member for Georgetown Central had something to do with that. I would also like to thank Youth Parliament Premier and Minister for Sustainability and Climate Resiliency, Ms. Lily Ann Aleria, Youth Parliament Leader of the Opposition, Ms. Janelle Colquhoun, and Speaker, Ms. Chanel Martinez, for their service of leadership to this group. It is overtly clear that your voices, along with your 23 other youth parliamentarians, create an overwhelming force to be reckoned with. You are working towards changing and taking control of a future that you, your children, and your grandchildren will inherit. You've made a choice to use your time to fight for your future. And this is deeply rooted in the passions that you hold and the care that you have to improve the lives of others. You have the responsibility to maintain hope in the face of adversity, which will only serve to grow and develop you as young leaders and as change makers. I don't want to speak for much longer, but I certainly am here and very interested and looking forward greatly to hearing from you today. Let me conclude by saying that I and the rest of government are extremely appreciative of your participation, all of the efforts you have put into this so far, and to hear the proposals, the debate, the cut and thrust, as they say, of the arguments. Youth Parliament, as always, involves members of the government and the opposition coming together to help teach our future leaders the nuances of Parliament and the making of legislation, the implementation of policy, and helping our students prepare for their debates and presentations. I thank those members for their dedication to our young politicians. I also thank the staff of Parliament and everyone else behind Youth Parliament who have guided you all through the process and helped make today possible. To those of you, again, who are here to observe these proceedings, it is certainly my distinct pleasure and honor now to be able to turn this chamber over to this incredible assembly of bright, young Caymanian young people, politicians, aspiring politicians, and I declare this the 16th Youth Parliament of the Cayman Islands officially open. Thank you.
This Honorable 16th Youth Parliament is now in session. I will ask the Honorable Premier to say prayers.
Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Parliament now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our sovereign, King Charles III, William, Prince of Wales, and all of the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially, we pray for the governor of our islands, the premier, the speaker of the parliament, the leader of the opposition, ministers of the cabinet, ex officio members, members of the parliament, the chief justice, and members of the judiciary, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace now and always. Amen.
Please be seated.
Reading by the Honorable Speaker of Messages and Announcements.
Good morning, everyone. Before I go ahead with my messages, I would just like to applaud the fact that during the month of Women's Month, we have two young, strong women leading both our government and our opposition. Not only that, but both of our motions are also being moved by two strong, lovely women. Fellow youth parliamentarians, His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Martin Roper, OBE, honorable members of Parliament, parents, teachers, students, and invited guests, welcome to the 16th Annual Youth Parliament Debate. Forging a sustainable and peaceful common future, the theme for this year's Commonwealth Day speaks volumes.
Commonwealth Secretary General, the Right Honourable Patricia Scotland KC, describes the theme as an active commitment of member states to collaborate on climate action, support the development of free and democratic societies, and the promotion of peace and prosperity to improve the lives of all Commonwealth citizens. Without a doubt, this is what today is about. Today, the Youth Parliament government is here to tackle an issue that our country faces daily: traffic. The government motion implementing a new public transportation system in the Cayman Islands seeks to expedite the traffic issue and introduce solutions to the many vehicles on our roads. On the other hand, the opposition is here to institute. The opposition's motion, implementation of a progressive income tax system in the Cayman Islands, seeks to provide solutions to the high cost of living in Cayman and encourages a stronger equity of wealth for all Caymanians. The Honourable Premier believes that the public transportation motion will decrease the number of cars on island, reduce the dependency on cars, create a reliable public transportation system, and ensures people will be safe. If passed, this motion promises that the system will be affordable, cost-efficient, sustainable, and over time, it will put a stop to the traffic virus. In the words of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, this motion was chosen because the opposition has recognized that wealth disparity and income inequality is an issue in our islands. If passed, the motion will stem the tide of financial strain on lower income households. The motions brought to this Honourable Youth Parliament today show that the youth of our islands are not oblivious to the issues which affect our community. They see what is happening and they have ideas. They have solutions. Solutions for ways to better our islands and sustain them for years to come. As I end my speech, I would like to quote Indian revolutionary Mahatma Gandhi, who said, "The future depends on what we do in the present." This can translate to simple things like studying and doing your homework now sets you up for a good GPA in the future. Preparing your bag the night before will allow for less stress in the mornings. What we do now affects the future. The laws we pass today affect the societies of the future. And if you've ever wondered what the future of the Cayman Islands looks like, just look up in the gallery at our students. Or better yet, look in front of you at our youth parliamentarians. It's bright, isn't it? I encourage the audience to listen. If you're here in the audience, watching on television, or listening by radio, listen carefully. These speeches are not just facts and opinions, but the ability for the youth to forge a sustainable and peaceful common future for these Cayman Islands. Thank you.
Other business? Private members' motions. Private members' motion number 1 of 2023, implementation of a progressive income tax system in the Cayman Islands, to be moved by the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, elected member for West Bay West.
I recognize the elected member for Bodden Town Central.
Madam Speaker, good morning. Before we start the debate on private members' motion number 1, I would like to move a motion to suspend Standing Order 32-4 to allow members of this Honourable House to read their speeches.
Is there a seconder to the motion? I recognize the Honourable Minister for Education.
I beg to second the motion.
The motion is that Standing Order 32-4 be suspended to allow members to read from their speeches. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Standing Order 32-4 is hereby suspended. I recognize the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, elected member for West Bay West.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move private members' motion number 1 of 2023, the implementation of a progressive income tax system in the Cayman Islands, which reads as follows. Whereas it is acknowledged that there is no current income tax system in the Cayman Islands, and whereas the strength of divides between socioeconomic class income in the Cayman Islands disproportionately disadvantages lower income households. And whereas wealth disparity in the face of high prices for food, housing, and utilities could have a destabilizing impact on the economy and quality of life for middle and low income Caymanians. And whereas low income households are disproportionately impacted by a high cost of living. And whereas implementation of a progressive style of income tax can improve access to education, early childhood through tertiary, housing, healthcare, safety nets, and security for the Caymanian population. And whereas in order to tackle socially corrosive issues like inequality and wealth disparity, the Cayman Islands needs to create an economy distributive in nature. Be it therefore resolved that this Honourable Youth Parliament considers the implementation and maintenance of a progressive income tax system that encourages stronger equity of wealth for all Cayman Islands citizens.
Private member's motion number 1 of 2023 has been duly moved. Is there a seconder to the motion? I recognize the Leader of the Opposition, elected member for Newlands.
Madam Speaker, I beg to second private member's motion number 1 of 2023.
The motion has been duly moved and seconded. Does the mover wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Speaker. First of all, I'm beyond thankful that we live in a society where our government supports our people to such an extent. Thanks to our government, the Cayman Islands is a great place to live for many people. We have sound law and order, well-developed infrastructure, and are renowned for being one of the largest offshore financial paradises. I would be lying if I said our government hasn't supported the system and the people of the Cayman Islands. However, Madam Speaker, it's what may lie in our society's future that has brought concern to us, and is the primary reason why we as the opposition have put this motion forward today. Why don't we look back to March 2020. The government closed the borders to all airlines and cruise ships. The restrictions on travel, while containing the virus, had significant negative impacts on the economy, particularly the tourism sector. Our economy itself is mainly fueled by the tourism sector and by the finance sector, together representing 50 to 60% of the country's gross domestic product. So, with over half of our total GDP being attributable to the tourism and finance sector, Madam Speaker, consider what our island as a whole would face if we were to lose them. Yes, our government introduced a range of programs and initiatives to support vulnerable people and businesses during this time. The government's efforts to preserve and protect human lives during the pandemic cannot be denied. But their COVID-19 response had a substantial financial impact during this significant period of time that we as the opposition cannot ignore. Madam Speaker, the response and recovery of the COVID-19 pandemic has adversely impacted the government's finances in past, and we as the opposition recognize that in the event of a future pandemic or financial crisis, our government will have no long-term sustainable revenue streams to protect our most vulnerable residents, with risk of insolvency if we do not put alternative sources of revenue in place to combat this. This is why we are here today. And I hope that we can provide a system for our government to support itself in the event that we face a crisis such as this again. Firstly, Madam Speaker, I want to address the sources of our government's income and why this is the opposition's primary concern when it comes to economic stability of our country. The government's main revenue streams, the financial services and the tourism industry, once again, represent 50 to 60% of the country's GDP, a significant number. So, with over half of our total gross domestic product being attributable to the tourism and finance sector, Madam Speaker, consider the devastation our island as a whole would face if a global crisis forces our borders to close once again. Our government would be putting pressure on the individuals within our society most vulnerable to the burden of economic shortfalls. What is our government's backup plan if we lose our tourism and finance industries? Madam Speaker, but what about the government's reserves that have been put in place to support the economy during COVID? Well, the finance minister at the time, Roy McTaggart, had said that if the country runs out of reserves before the tourism sector and the world economy recovers, the government may have had to consider taxation. we need to anticipate that these reserves won't last forever. Are we willing to wait for our financial industries and tourism sectors to leave before we have had the chance to safeguard our economy? This is why we are proposing a progressive income tax. Madam Speaker, we need to start thinking about locally earned sources of income, of government funding. And we need to put it in place before we face a crisis. It's not if, it is when, and we need our government to be prepared to support our Caymanian people if we face a crisis again. I'm aware that there is a stigma around the word taxation for many people. I want to be very clear in reinforcing that our islands are not tax-free. A range from 7% to 27% is applied to almost everything purchased, and we need to get rid of the notion that consumption tax here is no tax. This means that for almost everything bought here, whether that means luxury boats or consumables at a supermarket, everyone in the Cayman Islands must pay the same consumption tax for everything bought. So, Madam Speaker, why would we want to instead propose a progressive income tax on our people instead of the current form of tax? Well, we see the progressive tax system as a far more equitable and profitable source of revenue. People with different incomes are taxed proportionally. It lessens the tax burden on the poor, and it imposes a greater percentage of taxation on the people that can afford to pay more. How a government taxes its citizens is a direct declaration of a country's values. As our lower income earning citizens struggle with the rising cost of living in our country, the wealthiest and most comfortable elites benefit from a system that holds no jurisdiction over them. The system as it currently stands levies the same percentages on products or goods purchased regardless of the buyer's income, and is disproportionately difficult on low-income earners in our society. It is equal, but it is not equitable, and we don't think this is right. I assume that the biggest argument when addressing our motion will be, what may happen to our finance industries if we implement a progressive income tax? Wouldn't higher percentages of income tax on our higher earners drive wealthy foreign investors away? But has our government stopped to consider what may happen if they didn't? Our government faces the moral decision today of either imposing an income tax on the wealthy that can afford to contribute or leaving our most vulnerable citizens in instability. Has our government made our economy easy and exploitable for the top? Have they left the majority of Caymanians with financial hardships that in the case of a crisis our government would have no way to sustainably support on the long term? To conclude, Madam Speaker, please consider the opposition's efforts to come together in trying to ease the struggles of our community and protect our economy. Madam Speaker, our government has an obligation to protect its people, and I hope that they are able to choose the well-being of their people and future over short-term wealth and greed. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honourable Minister of Financial Services and Commerce.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I'm here to oppose the private member's motion number 1 of 2023. Their proposal is to implement a progressive tax system in the form of income tax. However, I believe that the government does enough for its citizens. Our aim as the government is to ensure that our citizens are as independent as possible and require little to no government assistance. Based on the 6 whereas, which states, and quote, and whereas in order to tackle socially corrosive issues like inequality and wealth disparity, the Cayman Islands needs to create an economy distributive in nature, end quote. The problem put forth is inequality and wealth disparity, and to solve this issue is to implement a current income tax system in the Cayman Islands. I don't believe that this method will solve the problem, and in fact, may add to the problem. Madam Speaker, as the Minister with responsibility of Financial Services and Commerce, Investment, Innovation, and Social Development, it appears as though the opposition believe that by implementing such system, the low-income earners will be better off, which is just untrue. One only needs to pick up the 2021 census document, which reported that 22.4% of Caymanians are making an income of less than $28,799 a year, which is approximately $2,000.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, point of order, evidence for that claim.
Honorable Minister, you may continue.
Which is approximately $2,399.92 per month. Before any opposition member wants to be froggy and leap, the evidence is right here. Madam Speaker, the NAU happens to fall within my remit, and to put into context, the cost of living that our island currently sits at, a conservative estimate provided by livingcost.org states one person can live off of $3,090. In spite of that, my government has taken great precautions and by implementing and gradually upgrading the Needs Assessment Unit. Madam Speaker, that unit, that staff, they work diligently to ensure that Caymanians are well taken care of. To be eligible for these benefits at Needs Assessment Unit, you must be 1, a Caymanian, have Caymanian dependents, or be married to a Caymanian, or be making an income of less than $3,000, or if you're making more than $3,000, you must be disabled yourself or be caring for someone who is disabled. Madam Speaker, even though NAU is a part of my department, I do not pride myself on needing to have a unit where people are reliant on government assistance to stay afloat. Madam Speaker, furthermore, implementing a progressive tax system will create a greater socio-economical divide, which the opposition claims to be closing. By implementing such a system, the lower class is taxed at a certain percentage based on wages. As soon as they receive a pay raise, the assistance they are used to becomes limited, and they are taxed an additional amount based on how much money is over their original salary at a higher percentage. This will leave the people in shock, and they would prefer to make less money to receive more benefits and feel more secure. This leaves many of our lower and middle class citizens in a stagnant state. Madam Speaker, I was told by our very opposition members that this motion was supposed to help the less fortunate, and right now it's looking to me as if it will do more harm than good. Madam Speaker, you see where I'm going with this. Over time, this motion will continue to break down the will for Caymanians to improve and cause our citizens to live in anxiety and fear. If the opposition's version of closing the social-economic divide is bringing all its people down, then they should rethink their misplaced values and what they genuinely want for this country. By implementing this ludicrous system, the opposition is basically waiting for the people of today to improve themselves just to be kicked back into the position they were in the first place. Madam Speaker, as the Minister of Innovation, this motion, if put into movement, is going to put our dear Virgin Islands economy into extreme bankruptcy. To implement a progressive tax system, a form of identification must be in place, as the last name Ebanks, Bodden, Whitaker, and Scott are just a few examples of names that many Caymanians possess. To have an identification system, it can cost an estimate of $8 million and can take up to 5 years, according to CaymanCompass.com. This is an absurd amount of money and time for such a foolish and jocular motion. If the opposition believes that the upcoming identification system is going to suffice, they must have forgotten that the identification system isn't.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, point of order, relevance. It was nowhere stated that we would have an identification system, so I'm not sure what this honourable member is speaking about.
Honourable Minister, please continue your speech.
Madam Speaker, if the opposition were clear on what a progressive tax system is, they have to have an identification system for the system to work. Thank you. I will continue. They must have forgotten that the identification system is an option, and we as the government refuse to force our dear members of society to do what they don't want to do. To be fair, the opposition's idea to try and fix the cost of living problem is commendable, but this idiocy of a motion is not the way to fix this issue. Say the opposition's bright idea is put into play.
Honourable Minister, your time is up.
Madam Speaker, may I please have a minute or two?
You have half a minute.
Oh. Madam Speaker, where are the people who are proposed to plan all the nitty-gritty of the tax system coming from? When are they going to receive the time to spend with their families? How long are these very people going to take to come up with just a plan? Madam Speaker, I understand that the opposition is just as dedicated to the Cayman Islands as much as we are, but they must take into consideration their own workers who are also a part of the wider community. These people have a social life or a family to stand by, and it's simply not fair for them to be putting so much effort into a system that is very unlikely to succeed. Madam Speaker, the opposition has made it clear that the progressive tax system will be deducted directly from incomes instead of company tax. Unfortunately, they have not thought about the many loopholes that can be used to avoid these fees. Madam Speaker, it is as simple as changing the payment.
Honourable Minister, your 30 seconds are up. Please be seated.
Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for West Bay Central.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. You know, as a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, it is not a good morning, because I am here today to inform you all on how our lower income class citizens are extremely impacted by the high cost of living here in the Cayman Islands. Now, it is no secret that Cayman is very expensive. Growing up, this is something that has always been known. The cost of living in the Cayman Islands is on average 44.3% higher than in the United States and is expected to continue to increase in 2023. The Consumer Price Index published...
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Can we please get evidence?
May I ask that when you stand to give a point of order, you wait until you're recognized. Thank you. Elected member, you may continue.
The Consumer Price Index published by the Economics and Statistics Office states that the prices of goods in the first quarter of 2022 were higher by 11.2% compared to the first quarter of 2021. Such rate increases will be challenging for all Caymanians, particularly low-income Caymanians already on or near the financial edge. Now my question is, Madam Speaker, does the government wish to push us off this edge? There is a large and growing gap between the rich and poor, and this gap continues to widen, making it even more difficult for lower-income households to keep up with the cost of living. Higher-income households have more disposable income to cover their expenses, which means they can afford to live in more expensive neighborhoods, buy healthier foods, and pay for better quality services. Wouldn't it be nice, Madam Speaker, if all our Caymanians could afford to live with these luxuries? The cost of rent or mortgage payments is incredibly high, which makes it difficult for lower-income households to afford decent housing. The Housing and Utilities Division showed a 14.2% increase, as the index for water supply had a 53.4% increase. The cost of electricity also rose by 41.9% compared to the same period in 2021. Imputed rentals for owner-occupiers increased by 5.9%. Actual rentals paid by tenants went up by 6.9%. Now, I'm sure we can all agree that Cayman is a very beautiful place. And being born and raised in the Cayman Islands, I have experienced all its beauty. And it is a place I would love to spend the rest of my life in. But if prices continue to rise like this, Madam Speaker, I will be living with my mother forever. And I don't know about you, but I would like to own a house someday. Now, the lack of affordable housing is not only impacting young Caymanians, but is a contributing factor to income inequality. When lower-income households are unable to afford decent housing, they're often forced to live in inadequate accommodations. This can make it even more difficult for them to improve their economic situation and can perpetuate the cycle of poverty. In addition, upcoming interest rate increases will affect residents' ability to borrow from local banks. Now, how can we expect our Caymanians to live their life here, knowing that they will no longer be able to afford loans that they only need in the first place because the cost of living is so high? And for all those who fall over the financial edge due to the foregoing cost of living hikes, there are limited resource options. Now, while some people avoid losing their house or may be able to get a meal during difficult times, it is unacceptable, and I repeat, unacceptable for us to go on allowing our Caymanians to live like this. Given the circumstances and projections, it is now urgent for a long-term sustainability plan to be presented and discussed. A possible solution, progressive income tax. This system imposes a heavier tax burden on those who can afford it while providing relief to those who are struggling to make ends meet. This can be used to reduce income inequality by redistributing wealth from the rich to the poor. In conclusion, we have established that lower-income households are disproportionately impacted by the high cost of living. Income inequality, housing costs, and food prices are some of the factors that contribute to this disproportionate impact. Less equal societies have less stable economies. So by bridging the gap between the rich and the poor will not only significantly help the poor, but would also help the whole island. It is crucial that we work together to address these issues and find solutions that can help lower-income households access to affordable housing, healthy food, and other basic necessities. By doing so, we can create a more just and equitable society for all. And before I leave today, I would like to leave you with a quote. Equality means nothing unless incorporated into the institutions. Slobodan Milosevic. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm glad and proud to be speaking in the 16th Annual Cayman Islands Youth Parliament. If that's whose Youth Parliament this even is anymore, this opposition plans to present a motion to implement income tax into our Cayman Islands. Not only is this an outrageous and honestly chucklesome proposal to anyone who has the slightest idea as to how our economy works, but they also seem to have grossly underestimated just how much this country does and can do for its citizens without tax being implemented. I surveyed a large a population of the Cayman Islands to get their feedback on this motion. And what I found was that the response was overwhelmingly against. Over 80% of the respondents stated that they were either against or strongly opposed to this motion, with
I recognize the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Point of order, evidence.
Do you have evidence?
Yes, Madam Speaker, it's available online and I can present it to the member if they would like.
Can I see the evidence? Honorable Minister, please continue.
Thank you. And under the comments under the survey, one of the respondents even stated that they thought that the robberies going around would increase due to this. Now, Madam Speaker, I don't think that the robberies of shops in local areas around Cayman will increase due to the passing of this motion. The only robberies I see taking place is the robbing of the wealth of our people. As one of the members of my constituency in the beautiful district of Northside stated, quote, taxes? That's literally the first thing I brag about not having when I tell people I'm from Cayman. No, I speak as a minister, and also as a representative of my community, when I asked the opposition to remember which country they are serving, as our lack of tax here on island is a source of pride for our Caymanians, something that they pride themselves on, and a reason that foreigners move here. Moving on, we as the Cayman Islands are one of the few countries in the world to have the luxury of not having to rely on taxing our citizens in order to have a stable government and economy, and I think it is ludicrous that this opposition would ever try and change that. Sorry. Moving on with it, in proposing a motion that the majority of Cayman has shown to be against, the opposition seems to have forgotten one thing. And one thing I would like to state as a Minister of Education to remind them on of their fundamental job, which is to be the voice of the people. And in proposing such a motion that the people have stated that they are vastly and widely against, they have failed this job, Madam Speaker. This is not what they are supposed to be doing as the voice of the people.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. This member is misleading the public. Can he retract his statement?
I remind you to please wait until you acknowledged before you state a point of order or point of elucidation. Can the Honourable Minister please continue his speech?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, one thing that I do find a bit dreary, or dreary as some would say, is that the honourable opposition has not looked at other alternative solutions to the problems that they have identified in this motion. It's clear as they brought this forward as something that, as the honourable deputy leader of the opposition stated, was an emergency response in the past. Why are we bringing forth something that was an emergency response? It's something we must put in place now, especially when this government currently has a surplus thanks to our current economic system, which is threatened by this motion, and which all of the ministers are willing here to use to help identify and tackle the problems identified in this motion. Moving on, as some of my fellow members of government will soon point out, the Cayman Islands economy is set up in such a way that our lack of any tax attracts foreign investors, at least our lack of direct tax, as I'm sure the opposition will remind us, which contributes to the funds that our country can use to help our people and improve our country. It's a very system that led Cayman to having the surplus that I mentioned earlier. Now, an argument I hear coming all the way from East End is that, quote, Madam Speaker, this is income tax, not company tax, end quote. And I must confess that this was the exact same thing I thought, for at least 2 seconds before I thought it through. You see, income tax does not just affect the individuals making an income, but the companies and organizations that they work at as well. This includes and is vastly made up of foreign investors which contribute to our economy. There are multiple studies showing how income tax affects the companies negatively, some which are online and some which I have provided here if the opposition would like to see them. So a switch from how our current economy is set up to try and change this in a way that we have taxation is something that I don't think is necessary and should not be implemented, and is why I will be voting against this motion. Furthermore, since this motion will disrupt Cayman's current economy, it will actually make our economy less distributive in nature than it already is. Let me explain before anyone gets up to say another point of order. How our current system is set up is so that wealthy foreign investors are attracted to come into the island and invest into our country. And because of this, we are not reliant on having to propose or implement income tax on our citizens. This means that lower and middle class Caymanians, and in fact all Caymanians, as well as the expats and permanent residency holders who move here, do not have to pay income tax. What this means is that the ultra wealthy, the foreign investors
Honourable
come
Minister,
here.
your time is up.
May I get an additional 30 seconds to finish my speech?
You may.
Thank you. What this means is that the wealthiest of our society contribute the most, while the middle and the least currently do not have to give up what little wealth they already have. And I'd like to close off this speech by reminding the people here today of the history and the culture of the Cayman Islands and who we are, and to not pass this motion, as the last time the people of Cayman had to pay tax, half of them could not, Madam Speaker, because they were slaves. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Bodden Town West.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Continuing off of what my fellow member has said, the problem of income inequality as well as the cost of living has had a detrimental effect on the Caymanian population and continues to be one of the biggest issues on island. It has been a topic of great discussion, yet with little solutions actually being proposed. Even having the Honorable Premier Wayne Panton commenting on how the middle class and how they are under assault, yet has done little to nothing to meaningfully help them. In order to help the citizens of the Cayman Islands, we must create an economy that is distributive in nature. And for those who are familiar with economics, it is pretty well known that with an unregulated free market, yes, it may encourage business growth. However, it allows the rich to get richer and the poor to get poorer. We currently live in a country where people own mansions whilst your average Caymanian is $600 to $800 short on meeting their basic needs. This dilemma could easily be solved if we had a government that Caymanians could rely on, a government that Caymanians could depend on for financial security, a government that would be willing to take that extra step. So, in order to achieve this, we as the opposition are proposing a progressive income tax. But don't worry, we're not trying to make you file your taxes up till midnight. So what we're doing is that we're proposing this through a payroll tax, where the percentage taken out of your salary will not only be done by your employer, but half of it will be paid off by them. This would not only have you lose a bit per month instead of a huge payment.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Point of elucidation, Madam Speaker.
Do you give way?
I do not give way.
You may continue.
This would be done with not only you losing a bit per month instead of a huge payment every couple of months, but it would be done with you having to do virtually nothing. Also, before I get the comments on how this may work theoretically, but how about in practice, Bermuda is quite literally doing the exact same thing that I am proposing. An overseas...
I recognize the Honorable Minister for Education.
Point of elucidation, Madam Speaker.
Do you give way?
I do give way.
Does the honourable member think it is appropriate to implement a system used by Bermuda when they have just complained about the high cost of living in Cayman, when Bermuda actually has a much higher cost of living than even the Cayman Islands does?
Point of order, evidence. A laptop is not evidence.
May I ask the Honorable Minister to please be seated? Thank you. Please continue your speech.
Bermuda is quite literally doing the exact same thing that I am proposing. They are an overseas British territory with a similar landmass and a similar population, and they are doing better than us economically. And I didn't tell you this, Madam Speaker, but they also supposedly have a better public transportation system than us. So it'd be very nice for the government to take a note or two out of Bermuda's book. I also feel the need to put an emphasis on the word progressive in progressive income tax, as if you are a member of the middle or lower class, this will benefit you greatly. I understand that the pressure on the upper class may be alarming to some, as they may think it would affect business activity. However, if you look at it from a logical perspective, since you're being taxed on a monthly basis, it wouldn't affect that much of your demand if you're planning big purchases. If you were to be $50 shorter than usual, it wouldn't affect you buying a car that you've been saving up for the past 2 years. But I know...
Due to time, may I ask the Honorable Minister of Education to please be seated? Thank you.
But I know the government is going to look at this from a worst-case scenario point of view, so I'll do it for them. Let's say luxury products drastically fall in demand and businesses are on the decline. Well, do I have a fun fact for you? The exact same thing is going to happen if the prices keep going up. Although we may not be in a recession at the moment, let's not forget that our tourism industry is just recovering. It was suffering just a moment ago. And to remind the government, the tourism industry kind of makes up a quarter of our economy. So if prices keep going up, people are going, So if prices keep going up, people aren't going to be buying as many luxury goods. Businesses will be on the decline, and we may just enter a recession. The only difference between these two scenarios is that with our tax revenue, we'd be able to gain funds for the government to provide grants and subsidies with the condition that businesses must lower prices. So although the immediate effect may cause a drop in demand for some products, over time the middle class would have a much larger disposable income and strengthen the markets of a lot more businesses on island. The government may say something like, "But we aren't in a recession now, are we?" But what the government fails to understand is that this is not a question of if a recession is going to happen, but when. As our economy does not function like a linear graph where less income equals a recession, but rather a cycle where no matter the occasion, there will be recessions and there will be recoveries. And it is our job as the leaders of this country to be able to provide for Caymanians, so when these recessions do come, we are able to aid them the best we can. If the government refuses to pass this motion, they are openly stating that they would value short-term profits over the very lives of our Caymanian citizens. And just a gentle reminder, Madam Speaker, to the government, unlike some of them, I was not elected because I was the man that knew business. I was not elected because I bought everyone in my constituency a stove. I was elected for the stances I took and the calls to actions I made. So I'm sorry that they may not like this motion, but I would much rather push for a solution to a pressing problem.
Elected member, your time is up.
May I ask for an additional 30 seconds?
Due to time, I will ask that you please be seated so that we can move on. Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Boddentown East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As our national crest says, he hath founded it upon the seas. I am sure you all have heard of the wreck of the 10 sails. Nearly all of the stories end with a tax-free Cayman Islands as a result of the people's bravery. This has been carried on from the 1900s. Although there is no corporate tax system in the Cayman Islands, there is duty on goods imported that usually range from 7% on items to 42%. Some of these include cars, groceries, and clothes. If we tax the rich unreasonably more than the lower incomes, that would be unjust. For example, why would a person work 100-hour weeks for us to take away 70%? This would cause a motivation to work less and create lower economic output. Furthermore, people will be disincentivized to work harder and go to higher tax brackets. What sense does it make to work 100-hour weeks to get paid after tax, which is the same as someone working 50 hours, but at the same time, this can stimulate high income overseas and dodge taxation completely. But this has an opposite result, as we do not receive anything. Madam Speaker, in preparation for this debate, I consulted my constituents of Boddentown East, and we support the government's stance in objecting this motion. Madam Speaker, taxation would have a negative impact in our society, from our tourism factor to our education system. It will also increase our crime rate, as many are struggling in our current economy. As the majority of products are imported into our islands, many businesses will be gravely affected. Madam Speaker, have we forgotten the effect that COVID has had? The current government has taken steps to alleviate the duty cost in baby formula, Pampers, and supplies. With the 12% increase of cost of living, many citizens of the Cayman Islands have not seen an increase in salaries to even match the country's 12% in salaries, and yet you deem it necessary to add further expense by cost to those who are already finding it hard to meet ends meet. This will only cripple our economy further and make persons more dependent on us as the government through our NAU program, which is already being overextended. I ask you this, the opposition, when you look at our education systems with nearly over 3,000 plus graduates yearly who come out of school with no job experience, those unable to further their education, how are they able to meet those financial taxation? It's not realistic or possible for this to be viable in our country. As a member of this Honourable House of Parliament and Government, I take my stance to vote in to not vote in favor of this motion, as it will have a negative impact on us and future generations of these Cayman Islands. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Georgetown South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we cannot throw away this chance of equity and growth for the country. The opposition for this honorable youth parliament has brought progressive income taxes to the table. I am sure you must be wondering, what proof do you have that this will work in Cayman? For generations, there has been no personal experience with direct taxes. I understand. There is clearly a stigma surrounding the word taxes, as we often stigmatize what we do not understand. And we will not understand until it is explained. I am here today to give you examples of how the progressive system of income tax could work in Cayman. Firstly, I must say, I know many love the idea that there are no direct taxes, especially because of how much the economy depends on corporate firms. But Madam Speaker, having a progressive income tax would not drive these firms away. This is because we do not intend for there to be any corporate tax, any land tax, or any other form of direct tax, except...
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, point of order, misleading the House. This government has already proven that income tax negatively affects businesses such as these corporate firms, which does serve as a disincentive for them to stay or come here.
Elected member, you may continue.
I am sure that this will come as a shock to the people because many things that are new often do. I just hope, Madam Speaker, that the government of this honorable youth parliament can put away any misconceived ideas about taxes they may have. As there is no current system of progressive income tax in Cayman, we have to look to other states. Let us examine the bands in the UK. There's a basic rate, a higher rate, and an additional rate of taxation. There's also a personal allowance band, which is not taxed. These could be the bands we use in Cayman. Madam Speaker, as I listen to the government speak today, I notice that they feel income taxation is taking away a large sum of someone's pay, when that is definitely not the case. The elected member of Boddington West stated 70%. Madam Speaker, we need to be for real. We can look at Bermuda's system. Those earning less than $200,000 USD annually only pay 1.75% tax. And at the extreme, those earning 1 million USD or more will be taxed 10.25%. Madam Speaker, I am hoping that this government is able to better understand what a progressive income taxation system looks like. Here's an example of how it could work in Cayman. The personal allowance rate could be 0% taxation for those earning under $72,000 a year. So if you earn less than $6,000 a month, your income would not be taxed. The basic rate could be 2% for those earning between $72,000 and $100,000 a year. The additional rate could be 4% for those earning above $100,000 a year. Madam Speaker, I understand why people will be hesitant to this system. I understand why the government is hesitant to this motion. Hesitancy is simply history repeating itself. Madam Speaker, did you know that the UK abolished income taxes in the past? Simply because the people strongly opposed. After some time, they were able to reintroduce income taxes. This allowed them to remove import and export duties on more than 700 items. Now, this could be a benefit of this system in Cayman. Madam Speaker, with all that has been said, I am wondering if we are really here debating this motion, or are we debating change? When COVID came into the world, there had to be so many changes, and these changes were all for our own good. You may ask, why would we want change? Why would we change the way the economy works? Well, Madam Speaker, I think my fellow members of opposition did a wonderful job explaining the way it currently works does not work for everyone. We cannot possibly come up with how each income category will be taxed overnight. However, we can all work together in an attempt to increase the equity in Cayman. Even the blind could see, Madam Speaker, this motion is the way to go for our country to grow. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Cayman Brac East.
Good day, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this opposition plans to implement a progressive tax system into the Cayman Islands. Not only will this motion fail to solve the wealth disparity and provide a functional distributive economy, but it will make these matters even worse. Madam Speaker, this government finds this motion ludicrous. To ensure that there is no confusion, let me be clear. I'll be speaking about the impracticality of this motion for our economy and how it will affect the different classes of Cayman. Many of the middle income and lower income Caymanians' lives will be disrupted significantly by the implementation of progressive income tax. The stress of working paycheck to paycheck, coming home to feed their children, now added on is the stress of managing their taxes. This, Madam Speaker, seems to appear to be unfair and even as if we're neglecting our lesser income population. This act will put into the minds of our people that our government is truly money hungry and does not
Recognize the elected member for West Bay North.
Madam Speaker, point of order, the honourable member is misleading the House and I therefore ask him to retract the statement.
Elected member, please retract your statement.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Speaker, there's a common belief that progressive income tax is fair to all working incomes. Some even say that it is unfair to the upper income citizens. While on paper, this may be true, when we look at the real world and how it affected them, we can see a whole other result. Countries that have already implemented progressive income tax, such as Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Germany, Japan, Norway, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and the United States. These same countries' poverty rates are 14.8% all averaged, with the highest percentage being 18.6%.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, point of order, evidence.
Yes, ma'am, I have evidence.
You may continue your speech.
Meanwhile, if we look at the Cayman Islands, we have a poverty rate of only 1.6%. When we take a look at all these numbers, there's a clear observation to be made. All the countries that have implemented their progressive income tax have a much higher rate of poverty than that of the Cayman Islands. If progressive income tax is supposed to tackle poverty and wealth inequality, then how come these nations which have implemented tax are doing considerably worse than the Cayman Islands? We as the government take pride in not stealing the wealth of our citizens, something the opposition seems to want to change. Whilst there are other factors that contribute to poverty rate of these countries, it is important to acknowledge that progressive income tax is what they all have in common. Our island should be proud that our poverty rate is only 1.6% and strive to make it zero, not in the double digits as the rest of the world. Madam Speaker, although income tax seems enticing from a glance, our government will be faced with a whole new set of logistics to overcome. With the progressive income tax also follows many of times is tax evasion. Tax evasion is the illegal non-payment or underpayment of tax. This is a larger problem than it seems. The whole purpose of implementing a progressive income tax is to make enough income for our economy to then have enough money to focus on several projects that may benefit the society. This idea seems to be a very good idea, but when an insufficient amount of money is coming from tax, how do we fix that problem? This problem is a very common one throughout the world, including America. A tax gap is the difference between true tax liability for a given tax year and the amount that is paid on time. The IRS has provided estimates of a tax gap for 2001, which is $345 billion, 2006, which is $450 billion, 2008, which is $400 to $500 billion, and 2019, which is about $600 billion. What this leads to is the ultra-wealthy paying virtually no tax, while the middle class and less wealthy still have to pay up. America is a much larger place than the Cayman Islands. However, it would be ignorant for us to think that this problem couldn't occur to us. So in conclusion, Madam Speaker, the government is making it explicit as to why implementing a progressive income tax is simply not right for the Cayman Islands. Our islands have been progressing more than adequately without the implementation of the progressive income tax. We've managed to keep our poverty rates low in our society, and we should be striving to further decrease the rate, not implement methods that will only increase it. This also goes for our economy. Where tax may seem to benefit the economy, it inherently hurts it more, whilst affecting society as a whole. Using the knowledge that other countries have already given us from their experience, we can make wise decisions instead of jumping in with 2 feet, making all the mistakes ourselves that are not necessary to make. We as a country need to work to move forward and not trail further back. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness and Home Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, in this Honourable House of Parliament, I want to ask, as a matter of fact, I want to know what in the world opposition is thinking. Implementation of a progressive income tax in the Cayman Islands just sounds preposterous. Madam Speaker, is the opposition not thinking about Cayman's future? The Cayman Islands operates on a consumption tax model in which is a tax where people spend rather than where people earn. These duty rates vary with items such as high-value vehicles, alcohol, or tobacco, attracting a high rate, and with basic items such as staple foods, medicine, and certain financial services, creating a reduced rate or no rate at all. Progressive income tax penalizes those that work harder and can lead to individuals hiding income or assets. Madam Speaker, the implementation of the proposed policy will increase the expenses of the people. Madam Speaker, it really looks like the opposition really didn't do their research, as they keep repeatedly comparing the Cayman Islands to Bermuda. This just don't make sense, as Numbeo.com states that Bermuda has a 34% higher cost of living than Cayman Islands. The cost of goods in the Cayman Islands are directly affected by external forces. Under the current model, many basic households items attract a low duty rate or none at all, yet the cost of goods continue to rise. With many basic goods attracting no duty at all, the implementation of a progressive income tax system is not going to help lower the cost of these goods, but instead add economic stress on the very people opposition is seeking to help. Many governments make bad decisions because of what they think is politically appealing in the moment, but this government is going to make sure that this bad decision opposition is imposing will not happen. Madam Speaker, progressive income taxation can lead to a circle of inflation. The implementation of the proposed policy will increase the expenses of the people. The expenses rise, employees ask for an increase in wages, employers increase their employees' wages.
I recognize the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Point of order, evidence.
Evidence stating, what do you want evidence of?
Thank you. I would like to see your evidence that claims that progressive style of taxation inflates our economy. Thank you very much.
I just said it, I explained it in the speech, actually, that the cycle of inflation.
But I would like to see physical evidence of that, not just word of mouth. And I cannot accept a digital copy. I need a physical copy, or you will need to retract your statement. Thank you very much.
May I ask the Deputy of Opposition to allow our Honourable Minister to finish her speech?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Implementation of a progressive income tax system in the Cayman Islands will negatively impact the overall economic growth of the country. A progressive income tax system discourages investments and savings, which will lead to a decrease in economic activity. Madam Speaker, the implementation of a progressive income tax system will make the Cayman Islands less competitive in the global market. A higher tax rate will discourage foreign investment and talent from coming into our country. Madam Speaker, under no circumstances should we be considering a proposal that so threatens the foundation of our economy. A progressive income tax system can create a disincentive to work and earn more money, as the higher tax rates can reduce the financial rewards of higher income. This can lead to a decrease in overall productivity and economic growth in the long run. Madam Speaker, I just can't wrap my mind around why the opposition insists we should have this progressive income tax system when we receive the benefits of the consumption tax system. In our current consumption-based system, individuals are taxed on what they consume and not by how much income they make. This leaves more money available for individuals to save. The AARP policy book indicates that this increase in saving could help to promote greater financial stability and reduce the risk of indebtedness among households. A consumption tax helps to promote economic growth by encouraging investment and entrepreneurship. With a lower tax burden on businesses and individuals, more resources are available for investment in new ventures and innovative projects, which would help to spur economic growth and job creation. Madam Speaker, our current consumption tax provides the government with a consistently growing source of revenue that is used to fund public services, infrastructure, and social programs. Madam Speaker, I don't understand why opposition sees the need to try and fix a system which is not broken. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As my fellow opposition members have previously stated, we as the opposition would like to implement a taxation system known as the progressive income tax system in the Cayman Islands. Now, in these times where we face extremely high prices and low wages, where people are struggling to make ends meet, where our economy is trying to repair itself, Madam Speaker, we as the opposition have recognized that more must be done in order to ensure that we move towards a prosperous Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, today we propose a system that will not only benefit this honorable government, but it will most importantly benefit the citizens of the Cayman Islands. To start, it is a known fact that the Cayman Islands is currently a tax-neutral jurisdiction, meaning that there is no imposition of additional tax on capital. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, today, I know that it is apparent, we heard it in their speeches, Madam Speaker, that all this government is focusing on is the negatives. I'm hearing negative here, negative there. But Madam Speaker, I come to bring to this government's attention that these gas prices are a negative, that the cost of a house is a negative, that the cost of the average person's grocery bill is a negative. But Madam Speaker, mathematically speaking, I know that a negative plus a negative equals a positive. So Madam Speaker, today we propose this positive through this progressive income taxation system. Not only this, but today we recognize that it can be said that the current quality of life in the Cayman Islands is regressive. But today we propose a progression through this progressive income tax system. Today we recognize our roles as members of the opposition, which is not to oppose solely, but is to ensure that our people are catered to and that we as a country, as a nation, as a people thrive. Moreover, the implementation of a progressive style of income tax will do many great things for our people and economy. It is without question that the cost of living, especially in the Cayman Islands, is extremely high due to inflation. With the implementation of a progressive style of income tax, these financial strains would significantly lessen. Madam Speaker, there's a Cayman Compass headline that reads, "My mortgage has doubled and a lettuce costs $7. What's going on?" Madam Speaker, this is my question as well, as I wonder what is going on with these prices. And I know that this is the cry of many consumers also. But with the implementation of this motion, this question would no longer need to be asked. Madam Speaker, I have to question if this government is truly considering the benefits of this motion. Yes, we as the opposition acknowledge the fact that there will be a huge, ginormous change for the Cayman Islands. But you know what else is a huge change? Having to come home not knowing where the next meal is going to come from. Can't afford to pay my mortgage, so I have to live in my car. Can't afford to pay my rent. Having to shower in World Gym Fitness just because I don't have a bathroom. That is a huge change, Madam Speaker. And if this honorable government says no to this motion, they'll be digging our Caymanians in a hole 6 feet deep, Madam Speaker. Now, I know that most of us think of the word tax and we cringe due to the aforementioned change that I just mentioned. But I invite us all to think of that mother who is struggling to make ends meet. She has a child and she struggles to provide. Madam Speaker, today we are thinking of that mother and that child and the yearn and desire he or she must have for a comfortable life. Now, I'm going to give you this analogy. I know that most of us here have gotten an immunization shot, at least once or twice in our lives. But in the stage before the needle meets the skin, there's fear, there's anxiety, fear of the pain that may be experienced. But after that prick, there may be a lingering of pain for a little while, but after there is relief, after there is immunization. So, Madam Speaker, we understand that there may be some fear before the prick, but due to the uncertainties of this motion. But after, we as the opposition can guarantee that there will be relief. There will be relief of financial strain. So that person showering in World Gym Fitness will finally be able to afford a bathroom of their own. So that person who is sleeping in their car will be able to sleep comfortably at night. So that person who is struggling to make ends meet will finally have the help that he or she needs. Now, in closing, Madam Speaker, the implementation of a progressive income tax would eliminate the epidemic of lifestyle issues plaguing the Cayman Islands. It would decrease financial burden, lower the cost of living, and ensure that there is
Honorable
equity.
Leader, your time is up.
Please, may I have 30 seconds?
You can.
Thank you. And ensure that there is equity of wealth. In addition, a quote by Oprah Winfrey states, "The ability to triumph begins with you always." So, Madam Speaker, today we as the opposition exercise our ability to triumph as it begins with us, a voice advocating for our people, for our minorities. So we recognize, Madam Speaker, that the heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight. So we do not expect the success of the implementation of our motion to come overnight, but with hard toil and hard work, we understand that the implementation of this motion will benefit the Cayman Islands on a whole. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today on this God-given morning to oppose Private Member's Motion number 1 of 2023. Madam Speaker,
the people of the Cayman Islands have long boasted a relatively secure economy and financial independence, but this all could soon be coming to an end. Madam Speaker, we have had decades of economic prosperity that has led to locals and foreigners taking advantage of our offshore banking sector and lack of taxation. However, recent proposals by the opposition are set to change this if put into action. Madam Speaker, the negative implications such an implementation will mean should be made clear in order to avoid putting the Cayman Islands' competitive economic edge at risk. Madam Speaker, simply put, this motion is laughable, ridiculous even. Madam Speaker, the opposition needs to realize that we are not in a Robin Hood fairy tale. Their proposed solution of taking more from the rich and giving to the poor will not fix wealth disparity or the class divide. Madam Speaker, this motion will undermine all that has made our beloved island successful and expose our very Caymanian citizens to potential long-term harms. And when we ruin our Caymanians, we ruin our country. Madam Speaker, by examining the current economic conditions in the Cayman Islands, as well as considering how other countries with imposed taxes fare, it will become apparent that taxation has no place here, and any implementation of such should be addressed with urgency before further damage is done. Furthermore, with the imposition of complex taxes and regulations, both businesses and individuals in our country will be put at a financial disadvantage compared to those in countries without such restrictions. For example, the Bahamas and Bermuda. And last time I checked, we are in the House of Parliament for the Cayman Islands. So why is the opposition trying to tear down our own country and build up others? Madam Speaker, the term tax haven is often one that is used negatively. Tax havens such as the Cayman Islands are attractive for businesses as they offer no taxation on residents' income, no capital gain tax, and no estate tax.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, point of order. This honourable member is misleading the House, as we are not a tax haven, but rather a tax-neutral jurisdiction. And if you would like further justification of this claim, I do have evidence to support it.
For time's sake, Madam Speaker, I'll retract that statement for now. I know we got places to be. However, the introduction of an income tax system would disincentivize businesses from relocating and investing in the Cayman Islands, thus reducing the inflow of foreign capital and hindering economic growth. Such an income tax may also result in higher tax rates for existing businesses, which could further reduce investment. Now, Madam Speaker, this proposed tax system would be detrimental to our country due to several reasons. Firstly, the Cayman Islands are a small country, with a limited GDP. This means that the islands would not be able to generate sufficient revenue to cover the cost of taxation or any department related to such, whereas funds could be allocated to sectors that actually need funding, Madam Speaker. Furthermore, the introduction of taxes would reduce the level of foreign investment in new businesses and industries. Additionally, the implementation of this system would lead to an increase in prices, as businesses would pass the cost of taxation onto consumers. This would lead to a decrease in consumer spending, which would ultimately lead to a decrease in economic growth. Madam Speaker, if the elected member for Bodden Town West or the leader of the opposition actually studied basic economics, they would know about inflation. They would know that their proposed system would ultimately lead to this. Madam Speaker, if we take money from people and give it to more people, let me rephrase, I apologize. If we take money from the rich and give to the poor now have more money to buy the more expensive things. That means the business owner will raise them prices. All right, we keep the cycle again. They take more money from the rich, give to the poor. Business owner raises prices. And inflation is the actual raising of prices, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we actually do not have any industries that would benefit from a personal income tax system. But do you know what we do have, Madam Speaker? We have our people. We stand here in this very house today to fight for the will of the people. But, Madam Speaker, when a man wakes up every morning at 5:30 just to have 15% of his hard-earned income taken away from him, this is when we know as legislators have failed our people. Madam Speaker, what we don't do in the Cayman Islands that has made us so successful is the fact we do not tax productivity. We do not tax hard work. We reward that behavior, Madam Speaker. In conclusion, a tax system in the Cayman Islands is not an ideal solution for narrowing the societal.
I recognize the elected member for East End.
Point of elucidation, Madam Speaker. Is this honorable members?
Yo, I don't give way, please.
I recognize the elected member for Georgetown South.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Decorum.
I apologize. I don't give way. Please sit down. All right. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, a tax system in the Cayman Islands is not an ideal solution for narrowing the societal gap between wealthy and poor individuals. We as legislators are responsible for making the decisions that impact all citizens of the Cayman Islands, and we should develop policies and initiatives which will actually benefit our citizens. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Whew. If no other member wishes to speak, I will ask the mover of the motion to exercise her right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would first like to thank the government for their concerns about our proposed system. However, I want to address some of the misconceptions and quite fondly interesting points and direct quotes made from the government that I would like to address. The government does enough for its citizens. But I would stand to question this. As our lower income citizens earn or struggle with the rising costs of living in our country, where every resident of the Cayman Islands is required by law to have and pay for at minimum health insurance that is notoriously expensive if you are not a member of the civil service, and where, according to the government's own inspection results from the OES data, 80% of Caymanian students attend schools that do not meet national standards. Where PTAs in our government-led schools in past have cited a lack of resources, such as a reoccurring issue with a lack of paper. Has our government stood before us saying, and I quote, "The government does enough for its citizens"? Representatives of parent-teacher associations from 12 schools have also highlighted numerous concerns around the lack of basic resources in some of the government-led schools, behavior issues, and the perception that good teachers are leaving the system. With proportional taxation to an individual's income, it would actually reduce the hardships of our lower income.
I recognize the Honourable Minister for Education.
Point of elucidation, Madam Speaker.
Do you give way?
I do not give way.
Please continue.
Thank you. It would actually reduce the hardships of our lower income earning community and uplift industries like education, that our government, with a stable stream of revenue through our proposed progressive income tax, will have sustainable funding to put into these industries. Our government said, "We will not force our society to do what they do not want to do." But I would stand to argue that the lack of an honest, transparent, and accountable system like income tax will only lead to misreporting of business activities and future revenue loss for the government. This will come at the expense of the Caymanian public and exploit the middle and lower income earners of our society. No tax. That is the first thing I brag about when I tell people about Cayman. As stated before, I want to be very clear in reinforcing that our islands are not tax-free. A range of 7% to 27% is applied to almost everything purchased. We need to eliminate the notion that consumption tax here is no tax. This means that for almost everything bought here, everyone in the Cayman Islands must pay the same consumption tax for everything bought. Our tax-neutral system, as it currently stands, does not serve to benefit or protect the lower middle income earners of society. Madam Speaker, our government is insistent on disregarding our references for a tax system structure because they have highlighted Bermuda's high cost of living. But they have a higher GDP. A higher GDP usually indicates how successful they are economically, and thus their ability to provide to the most vulnerable. That is the difference between our countries. Bermuda has the ability to locally support their society, and we don't, and that is the bottom line. Our government has claimed that our proposed progressive taxation does not only affect the people it is imposed on, but the financial companies that employ them. And I would say that this is very true. But we have to keep in mind that the majority of the financial companies that are employing our Caymanian people already deal day by day with similar tax structures and deals with their overseas entities and clients. Our government has also referenced the Wreck of the 10 sales legislation. I want to enlighten some of our audience members that may not be familiar with its history. The Wreck of the 10 Sails is a historic shipwreck that occurred off the east end of Grand Cayman on the 8th of February, 1794. Historical justification in many contexts should be questioned. Historical justification would also be used to legitimize the separation of race and gender. I want you to deeply consider that for a moment.
I recognize the Honorable Minister for Education.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Misleading the House. For one thing, this member has stated that not representation, but historical, like basically trying to prove that this is the case for something, whereas this is not the basis of the argument that we presented. We have presented the argument that we should be moving forward into the future and not bringing our system back into systems like the past, where we did have separations of race, where we did have slavery, where our people did suffer because of policies like the one that this motion is bringing forth from the same people who enslaved us.
Please continue your reply.
I would actually choose to argue with that statement because your Honorable Minister over there directly used the Wreck of the 10 Sails in her debate. Thank you very much.
Due to time, I ask you please be seated. Thank you.
Thank you. Opinions change. And if we hope to sustainably support ourselves in the future, our decisions should not be affected by the weather of the day, but the climate of the era. This era calls for change. We call for change. Our people call for change, and we have settled too long with high costs of living. We have stood here today to propose a motion that provides a solution to their many economic problems. How can our government stand to criticize us on our solutions when they haven't provided a single solution of their own? Is the government not focusing on our future? Or is the opposition not focusing on our future? This was a quote. I would say that we've been the only ones in this Parliament building so far today that have thought about our future. I haven't heard a single alternative solution to any of these whereas statements that we have brought forward today.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Please be seated.
So I hope our government deeply considers our comprehensively elaborated motion and puts forward the sustainability of our Caymanian society before they focus on foreign relations. The government is the representative of the Caymanian people, so I urge them not to make it seem as though their focuses lie elsewhere. Madam Speaker, I want to once again reiterate, the richest percentage of the population is protected by a system that holds no accountability over the people that are most able to pay. With no property taxes or rates, no controls on the foreign ownership of property and land, and no mandates to report personal wealth, the government has made our economy easy and exploitable for the top and has left the majority with difficulty and financial hardships that, in the case of a crisis, our government would have no way to sustainably support on the long term. If they are fighting for the will of the people, I would suggest, with the community's best interest in mind, to find a solution for them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is, be it therefore resolved that this Honourable Youth Parliament considers the implementation and maintenance of a progressive income tax system that encourages stronger equity of wealth for all Cayman Islands citizens. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. No.
Those against, no.
No.
The noes have it. I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, may I have a division, please?
Madam Clerk, please take the division.
Honorable Lilian Alera.
No.
Honorable Alexander Harris.
No.
Honorable Amani Ebanks.
No.
Honorable Kira Borden.
No.
Honorable Ashley Ebanks.
No.
Honorable Chloe Reed.
With a great feeling, no.
Honorable Jelani Hanson.
No.
Honorable Chad Powell.
No, and I apologize for earlier. I was too tired because the opposition was taking too long.
Miss
No.
Elizabeth Thomas.
No.
Mr. Pranav Anu.
No.
Miss Mia Groves.
No.
Honorable Janelle Cahoon.
Aye.
Miss Abby Walton.
Aye.
Mr. Rodane Thomas.
Aye.
Miss Rian Matute Scott.
Aye.
Mr. Christian Campbell.
I abstain.
Miss Abigail Elliott.
Aye.
Honorable Bethany Mitchell.
With passion reinforced, aye.
Miss Laura Lee Bryan.
Aye.
Mr. Christopher Sanchez.
Aye.
Mr. Zachary Allen.
Aye.
The result of the division is 9 ayes, 11 noes, and 1 abstention. Private members' motion number 1 of 2023, implementation of a progressive income tax system in the Cayman Islands, has failed. The House will now suspend its proceedings for lunch. I ask all members to return to the chamber promptly at 1:30 p.m.